welcome. Grab yourself a seat. Recently, MC Toon had a debate with Witsit Gets It, a guy called Austin. Unfortunately, Witsit doesn't get it. Unlike my wonderful patrons. With massive thanks to all my patrons, including new patrons Alice Vangstrom, John Roswell, TechBlog, Pyro Kitty Cat, Claire Johnson, Mr. Victory and Brian A. Shannon, and my latest patrons Pi Parrot, Gunnar Olsen, Sean White and Mark Edwards. Thank you all so very much. The excellent creator MC Toon, who is unfailingly polite, very intelligent, put forward some excellent arguments in his debate with Austin, who crapped on the floor and said, "Do you concede?" and not much more. I thought, I fancy a pop at this guy. Roll VT.
So yeah, let's go figure out this mystical problem that seems to elude the cognitive grasp of Glovers.
Oh yes, well this should be fun, Austin.
So as you see here, definition of gas pressure. Pressure is a force exerted by the substance per unit area on another substance. The pressure of a gas is the force that the gas exerts on the walls of its container.
Well, no problems with that per se, but it's not just the walls of the container. If you have a container and the pressure against those walls is 20 psi, if you move your measuring device to the center of the container, it would read 20 psi.
You know, just another, they're all going to say the same thing because it's obvious that the necessary antecedent to pressure is containment.
Oh, Austin, don't forget that bit just below your highlighted section. Atmospheric pressure varies with height, just as water pressure varies with depth. So in this article that you're quoting from, they make clear that there is a difference, i.e. for the hard of thinking, atmospheric pressure is not the same as gas pressure.
They invoke this mystical deified version of containment that doesn't exist anywhere else. It can't be substantiated.
Well, yes, I agree. If you look up these definitions all over the place, it will say gas pressure is the pressure against the walls of a container.
But of course, that isn't what pressure actually requires. Pressure is a force exerted by the substance per unit area on another substance. The pressure of a gas is the force that the gas exerts on the walls of its container, which is what we just read. When you blow air into a balloon, the balloon expands because the pressure of air molecules is greater on the inside of the balloon than the outside.
Get on with it.
Pressure is property which determines the direction in which mass flows. Mass, i.e. matter. If the balloon is released, the air moves from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure.
First straw man. No one is denying that pressurized balloon, if you let it go, unless you tie a knot in it, ask that guy, if you let it go, the air will rush out and equalize. But have you considered the air pressure at sea level is a lot higher than the air pressure at the top of Everest, but the air doesn't all rush up the mountain and there's no container between it.
Oh, does it now? Because apparently this is negated whenever there's a vacuum linear to our pressurized system here on Earth. Because of the invoking of a deified, unsubstantiated, elusive force known as gravity.
Stop using that term deified. It's not deified. Gravity exists. Whether you consider it a force or curvature of space-time or unicorn farts, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact you let go of an object, it will go downwards at 9.8 meters per second. Something is making it do that.
All right, now we'll go to the belly of the beast themselves. NASA. This is a NASA resource. Okay. The molecular definition of pressure from the kinetic theory of gases. A gas is composed of a large number of molecules that are very small relative to the distance between molecules. The molecules of a gas are in a constant random motion and frequently collide with each other in the walls of any container. The molecules possess the physical properties of mass, again, i.e. matter, momentum, and energy. The momentum of a single molecule is the product of its mass, again, i.e. matter, and velocity, while the kinetic energy is 1/2 the mass times the square of the velocity. As the gas molecules collide with the walls of a container, as shown on the left of the figure, the molecules impart momentum to the walls, producing a force perpendicular to the wall. The sum of the forces of all the molecules striking the wall, divided by the area of the wall, is defined to be the pressure. So this is NASA themselves defining giving us the molecular definition of pressure, and they've used the word container and wall a plethora of times in one singular paragraph.
Would you say I have a plethora of piñatas?
A what?
A plethora.
Oh, yes. You have a plethora.
Look, my pouty princess. No one is denying that.
So, yes, obviously, it is common sense that the necessary antecedent to gas pressure is a physical barrier. And of course, our atmosphere has gas pressure. Atmosphere, because there is no sphere.
Yeah, don't worry. You can use the word atmosphere without us assuming that you've conceded anything, okay?
For all intents and purposes, we'll just call it the atmosphere. And the atmosphere has gas pressure, right?
Oh, you little rascal. You tried to slip that in, didn't you? The gas in the atmosphere has atmospheric pressure. It's something different.
That's one of the things with Changes Toon, McLooney Toon said, was that it didn't really matter if there was a physical barrier because of his deified force known as gravity.
What MC Toon did say during the debate was gravity was the container.
And, like I said earlier, it's impossible for these people to even concede that this would be an anomaly.
Oh, concede. Another favourite word of yours. How many times did you use that in the debate with MC? Always claiming that he'd conceded something when he hadn't. Anyway, gravity is the lid that holds our atmosphere in, and it's the force or the effect that gives atmospheric pressure.
The atmosphere would inherently be an anomaly to the physical law of all other observable phenomena regarding gas pressure. And McLooney Tunes at one time, when asked about the gas pressure, I said something about gas pressure, and then he said atmospheric pressure, and I said, does the atmosphere have gas in it?
The only reason there is pressure in our atmosphere is the weight of the atmosphere above due to gravity.
So that's kind of the world that we live in, when we're talking to these toddlers known as globers. And again, to clarify, if you think the Earth is a globe, I don't call you a glober. I don't call you a globe zealot or a religious zealot. Or
no, apparently you tell us that we deify everything and we're toddlers. Ad hom much?
I don't even consider myself to be flat smacking you. Those are for the people that look directly into the face of contradictory evidence and they double down ignorantly, arrogantly. It's typically a lot to do with ego and lack of information, ignorance. And so that's when you get this title that's well-deserved of being a religious zealot, a globe zealot, a glober. Okay, and that's what McLooney Tunes is, of course.
Yeah, carry on with your ad homs. And MC Toon, wipe the floor with you. The problem is, thanks to Mr. Dunning and Mr. Kruger, you didn't even realise it.
So what can you do with people like that? That shows blatant dishonesty when it comes to an intellectual forum. It's laughable.
Pressure is a force exerted by the substance per unit area on another substance. The pressure of gas is the force that the gas exerts on the walls of its container, yada yada yada. Definition of gas pressure.edu. Your link. Atmospheric pressure is defined as the force per unit area exerted against a surface by the weight of the air above that surface. Definition of atmospheric pressure.edu. I'd call that dishonest. That's cherry picking. Snipping out a small section when Austin, for some reason, goes on about sodomy.
Let's see. Of course, the definition for gas pressure is that it has to have a container, walls, right? This is obvious. So again, globers are claiming that the atmosphere is the one exception to this rule, right?
Not so much. Here's some hydrogen plasma under pressure without touching the walls of a container. Its container is a magnetic container, not a physical container. Our atmosphere is contained by gravity and not a physical container.
So they invoke the deified force of gravity.
Again, with the deified term. I hope that you are not going to invoke anything that doesn't have evidence.
So I asked McToon on Facebook today, after it's been a week since the debate, right? And it's been like pulling teeth to even get him to concede anything.
Because he had nothing to concede.
So I asked him, okay, well, which gravity exactly is it that you're invoking to explain, the containment of gas pressure in the atmosphere on Earth? And he said both of them. I was like, okay, that's cool, bro. So you are invoking Newtonian gravity. And I was like, that was actually superseded in 1915.
No, it was refined. We still use Newtonian gravity for all sorts of things, not least of which is things like orbits of the planets and satellites, etc.
And he says, no, it's not. And Newtonian gravity is a fact, right? Well, what is Newtonian gravity? Newton's law of universal gravitation is usually stated that every particle attracts every other particle in the universe with a force, which is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centers.
Well, it is true that Newton thought of it as a force, but you can still take that equation and plug figures into it and get the correct answer. It works.
Over here in the real world, detached from the nonsense that is heliocentrism, we like to actually back up things that we say instead of just saying the word force.
Oh, good. So you're going to back up everything about the flat Earth, are you? How the sun and the moon stay up there, how the size of their rotation around the North Pole changes throughout the year, and how the sun must have to speed up when it completes a larger circuit, even though when we measure it, it doesn't. How eclipses work, how seasons work, how we stick to the Earth rather than float away, how the stars... Come on, and back it up.
Okay, so it has never been proven to be such a thing. And it's not that there isn't some argument for it. I, of course, think that gravity is nothing more than incoherent dielectric acceleration. I would actually go as far to say it's quite provable. We can do experiments to demonstrate exactly how this works. Everything is dielectric.
Dude, that's not backing it up. That's making a bold-ass, unsupported assertion.
Electrostatic if you prefer, but dielectric more specifically. Everything inherently is dielectric because it has matter, and then it has a relationship within the medium, the universal background, the absolute frame of reference, the field of energy that is the ether. It receives energy from that.
Would you like some dressing on your word salad?
So anything that falls to the ground inherently has an electrostatic relationship with the ground it's falling to. More specifically, again, dielectric acceleration. Even more specifically, it's incoherent dielectric acceleration. You can call it incoherent magnetism because dielectric acceleration is magnetism.
Can I call it bullshit?
It's super, super, super weak. Okay, so that's the truth about gravity. It is dependent on the proportionate density, the relative density relationship.
Yeah, I think bullshit. Because density is mass per volume. It's scalar, not a vector. Because something is denser than something else doesn't give it direction.
So typically that's air, but of course if you remove the air from a vacuum, then it's still a relative density. It's just void of it's just has much less disturbance, or much less what's the word?
Brian, don't! Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away.
Air to fight against, whatever the word is.
Brian, don't! Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away.
So, it's crazy. It's such a simple word.
Brian, don't! Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. But bird away.
But yeah, so anyway, when something falls, it's just the effect. If you measure it, it's just the measurement, the metrical representation of the downward acceleration.
The metrical representation. Basically 9.8 meters per second per second. Gravity.
Math is nothing more than a description. Dumb people will equate and conflate the metrical description known as math, right? Just a description, the metrical representation of downward acceleration being the effect. They will conflate that to the causality, the imposed cause of this mystical force known as gravity.
Step off a cliff and see how mystical it is then.
Right? Well, that just doesn't work. It doesn't really matter how much you slam on your keyboard and say it over and over, or how much you scream and break down and implode live time on camera as your ball religion's being ripped from your dying hands.
It doesn't matter how fast you speak, you're still providing no evidence for the flat earth, for your diamagnetic ether-based whatever the hell it was.
You know, like, it simply doesn't matter. Math is a description. Science is supposed to explain things.
Math is descriptive. It's also predictive. I could calculate the velocity and the angle I'd have to launch a missile to hit you on your dome.
Huge difference in descriptions and explanations. In fact, what we do is we take an observable phenomena and then we introduce a hypothesis. We have an independent variable in which we can control, and that is how we deduce it. Explanations, i.e. science. Descriptions, mathematical equations, those come after the fact.
Yeah. So do you think Newton suddenly sat down and just said every particle attracts every other particle in the universe with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centres? Or do you think he did some experiments, some observations before coming up with that?
The ether is the universal background, the absolute frame of reference. It acts as a slight compression onto the material world. There's a natural frame of reference of up and down. Okay?
And now, prepare yourself for a bumper serving of tasty word salad.
And there is an electrostatic relationship within all matter, but it is just a resultant, a hybrid in effect. It's negligible. Gravity is dependent on the matter itself, the dielectric nature of the matter itself, and then, of course, the acceleration is measurable.
My mind is a raging torrent, flooded with rivulets of thought, cascading into a waterfall of creative alternatives.
Gravity does not have autonomous field modality. That means that it is not a self-governing field, so it cannot be a force. It's not even a self-governing field. In fact, gravity is an anti-field. It's an acceleration to counter space. It's dependent on other factors. It is not independent. It is far from this deified mystical force that keeps the oceans bending convexly around the spherical exterior of a moving, spinning object.
You use your tongue prettier than a $20 whore.
I couldn't agree more, Taggart.
This is still a container. I just took the top off the coffee. Still a container. This is a container. Okay?
Yeah. Now turn it over and see what your mystical deified force of gravity and some hot coffee does to your Jacobs. I'd have to say it's not so much Witsit gets it as a bunch of cheesy Watsits. Well, Austin, if you want to come up with some fanciful theories, be my guest. But you're going to need some evidence. For our side, we've got all of science. I hope you enjoyed the show. Take care, see you again, and stay sensible.
Shut up and sit down.